My name is Daniel Harris, and this is the story I've never told anyone. I call it I Was Leaving, but she said, "What if you stayed?" Started on a rainy Tuesday in November, the kind of day where the sky feels heavy enough to crush you. I'd packed my life into 2 cardboard boxes and a suitcase, ready to leave the city that had slowly drained me for years. My apartment, once cluttered with memories and late-night laughter, now echoed with an emptiness that felt almost cruel. I wasn't just leaving an apartment. I was leaving my job, my friends, or what was left of them, and a relationship that had burned out long before I admitted it. I told myself I wasn't running away, but deep down I knew I was. That morning, I stopped by the office one last time. I didn't need to. I could have mailed my resignation papers, but something in me needed closure. Or maybe I wanted to see her again. Claire Whitmore. She was the kind of woman who made every room feel brighter, though she'd never admit it. Not in that smug, self-aware way some people do. Hers was effortless. A quiet confidence, wrapped in a mess of dark brown curls and a laugh that always came half a second later than you expected. We worked together for 3 years at an ad agency in downtown Chicago. At first, she was just a colleague, the one who stole my favorite mug from the communal kitchen and teased me for my obsession with black coffee. But somewhere between late-night campaign pitches and shared takeout on deadline nights, she became more. Not quite love, not quite friendship, something in between. But timing is a cruel thing. She was in a long-term relationship with a man named Nathan, a lawyer who, from the pictures on her desk, seemed carved out of ambition and tailored suits. And me? I was too scared to say anything, too scared to ruin what we had, even if what we had wasn't enough. So I stayed silent, for years. But that day, as I walked into the office lobby, my resignation letter folded neatly in my coat pocket, I thought, I'll see her one last time, say goodbye, and maybe I'll finally let her go. The office was quieter than usual. The rain blurred the cityscape outside the windows, and the usual hum of ringing phones and hurried conversations felt dulled. Claire was at her desk, hunched over her laptop, brow furrowed, a pencil stuck haphazardly in her hair like she'd forgotten it was there. When she looked up and saw me, she smiled. "Dan, I thought you were gone already." Her voice, it always hit me in the chest, like hearing a favorite song after years. "I'm about to," I said, awkwardly holding up an empty coffee cup as if to justify my presence. "Just came to drop off my ID badge and, say goodbye." She stood, slowly, her eyes scanning my face like she was trying to memorize it. "You're really leaving?" she asked softly. I nodded. "Yeah, I think it's time." We stood there for a moment, the silence stretching. People passed by, carrying stacks of paper and half-empty mugs, oblivious to the weight hanging in the air between us. "I'll miss you," she said finally. "It shouldn't have hurt as much as it did." "I'll miss you too." She reached out, fingers brushing my arm, just for a second. Too brief to mean anything, too long to mean nothing. I told myself to turn, to walk away. My car was waiting outside, my future, or at least some vague promise of one, packed into the trunk. But something in her eyes stopped me, something unspoken. And then she said it. "Dan, what if you stayed?" The words were soft, almost a whisper, but they hit me like a thunderclap. I blinked, my brain scrambling for meaning. "What? What if you stayed?" she repeated, voice steadier this time. "I don't know, maybe just for a while. Maybe don't leave yet." I didn't know how to respond. Was she saying she wanted me to stay for her? Or was it just casual, don't leave the office, don't leave the city? I felt my chest tighten. All the feelings I'd buried for years. The nights I stayed late just to sit near her. The times I laughed too hard at her jokes. The way her happiness mattered too much. Came rushing back. But then I thought of Nathan, the boyfriend, the lawyer. "Claire," I said slowly, "you have a life here, a boyfriend." She interrupted, shaking her head. "Things aren't what they look like, Dan. Not anymore." Her voice cracked just slightly on the last word, and something in me shifted. I remembered the bruised look in her eyes a few weeks ago when she came in late and distracted. The way she stopped mentioning Nathan's name as often. I didn't ask. Maybe I was afraid of the answer. Now, though, she looked at me like she needed me to. "Claire," I whispered. "What's going on?" She hesitated, glanced around the office, and then lowered her voice. "Not here," she said. "Can you meet me tonight? 7 p.m. at that little cafe on 9th Street. The one with the red door." I should have said no. I should have told her I was leaving in an hour and wouldn't be here by nightfall. But instead, I heard myself say, "Okay." That night, the rain hadn't stopped. The cafe was quiet, the kind of place where the coffee tasted burnt but the booths felt safe. Claire was already there, sitting by the window, her coat damp from the storm. She didn't look like the woman from the office. No pencil in her hair, no guarded smile. Just Claire, vulnerable, restless. Her fingers wrapped tightly around a mug of tea. When I sat across from her, she didn't speak right away. Finally, she said, "I don't know how to say this without sounding dramatic." I waited. "Nathan isn't who you think he is," she whispered. Something in her voice chilled me. "What do you mean?" She looked down, her knuckles white around the mug. "He's controlling, manipulative. It's been like this for a while. I just didn't want to admit it." My jaw tightened. "Claire, has he hurt you?" She shook her head, but too quickly. "Not like that, but he watches everything I do. Gets angry over nothing. Sometimes I feel like I'm..." She stopped herself, her eyes glassy. "Like you're what?" I pressed. "Like I'm disappearing," she said, her voice breaking. I stared at her, my chest heavy. All this time, I'd seen her smile at work, laugh in meetings, tease me about coffee mugs, and I hadn't known. "You should leave him," I said quietly. She looked up sharply. "It's not that simple." "It is that simple," I said, heat rising in my voice. "Claire, if he's making you feel unsafe, if he's..." "Dan," she interrupted, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for mine across the table. "That's why I asked you to stay." The world seemed to go still. She wasn't just asking me not to leave the city. She was asking me to stay for her. But in that moment, as her fingers brushed mine, I felt a flicker of fear. Not just for her, but for both of us. Because if Nathan was the kind of man she was describing, he wouldn't let her go easily. For a moment, we just sat there in the dimly lit cafe, her hand on mine, rain streaking down the window beside us like tears neither of us could shed. I wanted to pull her closer. I wanted to say, "I'll stay. For you. Always." But instead, all I managed was a quiet, "Claire, does he know you feel this way?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "He knows something's wrong. He senses it. But if I ever said the words out loud, I don't know what he'd do." I didn't like the way she said that. I glanced around the cafe, suddenly aware of every shadow, every stranger lingering too long by the door. My gut told me Nathan wasn't the type of man you could outmaneuver with a simple breakup conversation. "Do you trust me?" I asked. Claire's eyes locked on mine. There was no hesitation in her voice when she whispered, "Yes." Something in me shifted. A decision rooted itself quietly, stubbornly in my chest. I wasn't leaving tonight. That night, I didn't drive away from Chicago. I went back to my nearly empty apartment, dropped my suitcase in the corner, and sat in the dark for hours, thinking about Claire, about her voice when she said, "What if you stayed?" and the look in her eyes that told me she was asking for more than just company. I barely slept, and when I did, my dreams were jagged, images of Claire reaching for me, of a shadowy figure pulling her away. The next day, she didn't come to the office. By noon, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I called her. No answer. Texted. Nothing. By evening, I found myself driving past her apartment building. The lights were on. Her car was in the driveway, but something felt off. I was about to leave when I saw him. Nathan, tall, sharply dressed, with that kind of polished arrogance that felt like it was painted on his face. He was standing by the window, phone to his ear, pacing like a predator in a cage. I caught a glimpse of Claire behind him, just for a second, moving through the kitchen with her head down, her movements slow, almost mechanical. Something twisted in my stomach. That night, she called me. Her voice was quiet, trembling, like she was trying not to be heard. "Dan," she whispered. "I think he knows about last night." My heart pounded. "What did he say?" "Nothing," she said. "Not directly, but he's been watching me. More than usual. He asked why I was out so late. I lied. But I think..." The line went dead. I called back immediately. No answer. For 2 days, I didn't hear from her. And then, on the third night, there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, Claire stood there, soaked from the rain, a small duffel bag slung over her shoulder, eyes red like she hadn't slept in days. "Claire," I breathed. "What?" "I couldn't stay there," she whispered. "Not tonight. I needed to leave." I stepped aside, and she walked in. Her shoulders sagged the moment the door shut behind her, like the weight of the world had been resting there, and finally, for a moment, she could put it down. She dropped the bag by the couch, and I saw her hands shaking. I made her tea. She wrapped her fingers around the mug like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. "He went through my phone," she said quietly. "He saw your name. He didn't say anything, but, Dan, the way he looked at me," her voice faltered. "I wanted to say you're safe here. I wanted to promise her everything would be okay. But something deep inside whispered that we weren't just crossing a line, we were tearing through it. Because Nathan wasn't just going to let this go." The next morning, there was another knock at my door. Hard, sharp. Claire froze on the couch. Her mug rattled slightly in her hands. I opened the door, and there he was, Nathan. Up close, he looked even more dangerous. His smile was polite, almost friendly, but his eyes were cold. "Daniel, right?" he said smoothly. "Claire mentioned you." My stomach nodded. "She's here," he said. Not a question, a statement. I glanced back at Claire. Her face was pale. Her lips parted like she wanted to speak, but couldn't. Nathan's smile didn't waver. "Can we talk?" I stepped outside, closing the door behind me, my pulse pounding. The rain had eased into a mist, the kind that clings to your skin and makes the world feel heavy. Nathan stood there, hands in his pockets, his voice calm, but edged with steel. "You seem like a decent guy," he said. "So, let me make this easy. Claire comes home tonight, and you stay out of it." I stared at him. If she wants to go home, that's her choice. But if she doesn't? He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "You don't understand, do you?" The calmness in his tone was worse than anger. "You think you can swoop in, play the hero. But Claire isn't yours to save." His words cut deep, but not as deep as the quiet threat behind them. I didn't answer. I just watched him walk away, his figure dissolving into the fog, leaving behind a silence that felt like the air before a storm. When I went back inside, Claire was sitting on the couch, her eyes wide. "What did he say?" she whispered. I hesitated. "Nothing," I lied, but the truth was heavy in my chest. Because I knew this wasn't over. It was just beginning. That night, the rain finally stopped, but the silence in my apartment was louder than any storm. Claire sat on the edge of my couch, her fingers clenched in her lap. She hadn't taken off her coat. She hadn't touched the tea I made her. "Dan," she whispered, her voice frayed. "He won't stop." I sat across from her, my chest tight. "What do you mean?" Her eyes met mine, glassy and scared. "Nathan, he won't just walk away. I've tried to leave before. Once. Just once. And he..." She trailed off, biting her lip like the memory hurt to speak aloud. "And he what?" I pressed gently. She swallowed. "He found me within an hour. Showed up at my sister's house, smiling, charming, like he owned the world. And then he leaned in and whispered in my ear, 'Don't ever try that again.'" Her breath shuddered out of her, and suddenly all the little signs, the way she always checked over her shoulder, the tension in her laugh made sense. This wasn't just a breakup. This was escape. I wanted to tell her I'd protect her. I wanted to believe I could. But later that night, I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand. A message. Unknown number. "She'll come home. one way or another. I sat up, my heart hammering. I didn't tell Claire. The next day, I took off work, though technically I'd already quit. We drove out of the city just for air, for space. Claire kept staring out the window like she was afraid Nathan's car would appear in the rearview mirror. At one point, we pulled over by the lake. The water was gray, restless. "Dan," she said, her voice breaking. "Why are you doing this?" I looked at her, really looked at her. At the exhaustion etched into her face, the fragility she tried so hard to hide. "Because you asked me to stay," I said simply. Her eyes filled, and she leaned into me, her head on my shoulder. For a moment, the world felt still, safe, like maybe we could outrun this. But safety is an illusion. When we returned to the apartment that evening, the door was unlocked. I knew I'd locked it. I stepped in first, my pulse racing. The place looked normal, too normal. Nothing missing, nothing broken. And then I saw it. A single coffee mug. On the counter. Not mine. Nathan's. I didn't need a note. The message was clear. I was here. I can be here anytime. Claire's face went pale when she saw it. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered. "Do what?" "Live like this, looking over my shoulder, wondering when he's going to show up again." Her voice cracked. "I'm so tired, Dan." We sat there, the night stretching around us. I thought about calling the police. But what would I say? That a man left a coffee mug in my apartment? No, this needed to end another way. The confrontation wasn't planned. It happened 2 nights later, when Nathan showed up again. This time, he didn't knock. I woke to the sound of the door creaking, the faint click of shoes on the floor. I moved before I could think, grabbing the nearest thing. An old baseball bat from the closet, and stepping into the living room. Nathan stood there, calm, almost amused, like he'd been waiting for this. "You should have stayed out of it," he said quietly. "Get out," I said, my voice steady but shaking inside. He took a step closer. "Do you really think she's yours to save?" Claire appeared behind me, her voice sharp, trembling. "Nathan, stop." For the first time, his mask cracked. "Come home," he said, his tone more command than plea. "No," she whispered. Something in that word snapped the air between them. I don't remember every detail of what happened next. The shouting, the push, the moment Nathan's hand closed around my arm and the bat swung before I even thought. It didn't hit him hard, not enough to do damage, but enough to break the moment. He stepped back, eyes dark. "This isn't over," he spat, and then he left. Claire sank to the floor, shaking. I dropped the bat, my hands trembling too. For a long time, we didn't speak. The apartment felt haunted, not by ghosts, but by everything that had just happened. Finally, she whispered, "I can't go back, ever." "You won't," I said. Weeks passed. Police reports, restraining orders, locks changed. Nathan didn't show up again, not in person. But sometimes, I'd see a black car parked a little too long on the street. A shadow that felt like his. He faded from our lives, but not from our minds. Months later, Claire and I sat on that same couch. The one where she'd first come to me, trembling, asking for safety. Only this time, she wasn't shaking. She was smiling. A soft, tentative smile. "You really stayed," she said quietly. I reached for her hand. "I told you I would." Looking back now, I wonder what would have happened if I'd just driven away that November day. I wonder if Claire would have found her way out on her own. But I stayed. Not because I thought I could save her, but because sometimes the act of staying, of being there when someone needs you most, is its own kind of salvation. And maybe that's the lesson I'll never forget. Love isn't always the grand gestures or the perfect timing. Sometimes it's just choosing to stay even when leaving would be easier.